We usually think of Switzerland as a peaceful country that has avoided wars, except perhaps for the Napoleonic Wars. So why should the Swiss have built castles and other fortifications? Well, a peaceful Switzerland was not always the case, particularly in the Middle Ages. During these times, battles between rival lords made towns vulnerable. Castles were built to repel attacks and provide refuge for the local townfolks. Castles were built as fortified residences for important people, usually in a location that could be easily defended, such as a hilltop, or protected by water, either as a moat or as a natural feature. Over time, the need for a defensive structure lessened, and these castles became more grand and more like palaces. Switzerland, with its long history, is home for the whole spectrum of castles and palaces. However, many were destroyed in the 13th century by the Confederates fighting for their freedom, or, particularly in the West, during the Burgundian Wars. But plenty of these magnificent structures remain and are in use as museums, residences, or offices. Architecturally, there are two types of castles in Switzerland. The Germanic style with square keeps, the fortified towers that a castle is surrounded by, and the more refined Savoyard style with round towers. This presentation will describe the 44 castles and palaces that have been depicted on Swiss stamps, showing their location with drawings and photographs. They will be discussed in alphabetical order, except for the first castle to appear on a Swiss stamp, that of Château Chillon. Château Chillon, near Montreux, in the canton of Vaud, is in the southwest of Switzerland, as shown on the small map of the country. The detailed map shows how it was built on a rock ledge projecting out into Lake Geneva. Chillon was protected by water on the residential quarters side and by the defensive structures on the landward side. Archaeologists have found evidence that the site was occupied as early as the Bronze Age. However, construction began before 1150, which is the earliest written mention of the castle. In 1255, the present form of the castle was ordered by Peter II of Savoy and undertaken by architect Pierre Meunier, who added the two defensive towers that flank the entrance. As previously mentioned, Chillon was the first castle to appear on a Swiss stamp, specifically the 10 centime denomination in the 1936-42 Landscape Definitive Series and its many color changes. A better representation of the castle is found on the 1998 70 centime joint issue with China. Chillon also appears on the 80 plus 40 centime value of the 1978 Pro Patria semi-postal set. As an aside, if you are interested in other philatelic depictions of castles, look into illustrated postcards or pictorial cancels that far outnumber the list of stamps. Shown here are a postal card featuring Esteveyer-le-Lac Castle and a cachet cover with a pictorial postmark depicting the castle in books. Now let's look at the other castles that have appeared on Swiss stamps. The castle in Aarwangen in the canton of Bern, as shown on the small map, was built in the Germanic style with a square keep. The keep was built in the 13th century by the Counts of Kyburg to protect a bridge over the Aar River, as the detailed map shows. In 1432, the castle became the seat of the Bernese governor, who added the buildings adjoining the keep in the 15th and 16th century. The feature on the top of the keep was built in the Baroque style in 1624-25 by Valentin Friedrich. The castle is featured on the 2016 Stamp Day souvenir sheet of two 50 centime plus 25 centime semi-postal stamps with a central label. The stamp on the left shows the castle, and flowers and an irrigation system are seen on the stamp on the right. The castle in Aigle is in the canton of Vaud, as shown in the small map, and is said to be the most important fortress in Switzerland. Two separate fortified towers were constructed in the beginning of the 13th century. During the next 100 years, the towers were joined by a wall, and by an additional building was erected inside of the walls. In 1475, the mountain regions of Saanen and Pays d'Anhalt, who were allied with Bern, attacked and burned the tower of Aigle Castle. They then gave Aigle town and the surrounding district to Bern in exchange for not having to pay 1/3 of their income to Bern. In the Treaty of Freiburg from 1476, Freiburg received rights over the Aigle district, which they gave up to Bern in 1483. Bern rebuilt Aigle Castle in 1489 and made it the seat of the bailiwick of Aigle. In 1476, the Aigle region became the first French-speaking part of the Helvetic Confederation. The Bernese gave the castle its present form. The castle was the seat of the governors of Aigle in the 16th and 17th centuries. In 1804, the town of Aigle bought the castle and used it as a courthouse, prison, and housing for the poor. It was declared a national monument in 1900, but continued serving as a prison until 1974. The castle now houses the Wine and Vine Museum. The castle appears in the 1977 20 plus 10 centime pro patria semi-postal. The next castles we're going to discuss are those in Bellinzona, which is in Canton Ticino in the far south of Switzerland, as shown in the small map. Bellinzona has three castles, and they have a common history, so I'll discuss them together. The three castles in Bellinzona are Casa Grande, Montebello, and Sasso Corbaro. Fortifications have existed at the site of the oldest of these three castles, Castle Grande, since the 4th century. However, its current incarnation dates from the 13th century, with expansion from 1473 to 1486. Montebello Castle also dates from the 13th century, while Sasso Corbaro Castle dates from 1479. Walls extending from Casa Grande and Montebello, the two older castles, down to Bellinzona below, protected the city. Sasso Corbaro was added to the defenses to block the Confederates from reaching Milan, which controlled the region until 1419, when forces from Uri and Obwalden gained control. 3 years later, Milan retook Bellinzona and defeated the Swiss forces at the Battle of Arbedo in 1422. The Swiss tried again in 1439, but were unsuccessful at taking Bellinzona. Other Swiss successes, however, led Milan to grant control of the Levantine Valley to Uri in 1441. It was at this time the fortifications were strengthened and Sasso Corbaro was built. In 1499, Milan fell to the forces of Louis XII of France. The French occupied Bellinzona, but were driven out by the local populace who, to protect themselves from the French, asked to become part of the Swiss Confederation in 1500. The three castles were then occupied by Swiss forces, Castle Grande by Uri, Montebello by Schwyz, and Sassocabarro by Unterwalden. The castles were restored in the 1990s and house museums now. Castle Grande is featured on one of the two 2017 1 franc Europa stamps. Montebello is pictured on the 1976 80 plus 40 centimes Pro Patria semi-postal and the 2003 90 centimes UNESCO World Heritage Site stamp. The Castle Barreau, along with Montebello, is illustrated on the other 2017 1 franc Europa stamp. The ruins of Bursek Castle are found above the town of Arlesheim in the canton of Basel-Landschaft, which is in the northwest portion of Switzerland, as shown in the small map. The castle is one of 4 ruins that are on the hillside above the town of Arlesheim. The castle was constructed in the 12th century by the Principality of Basel and remained in its possession until 1762, when it was abandoned. It was burned by the local populace during the 1798 to 1804 revolution against Napoleonic rule. All that remains of the original castle are the chapel, tower, and surrounding wall. Bursek and its notable gardens are illustrated in the 1 franc plus 50 centimes semi-postal. The stamp is from the 2006 Pro Patria set, picturing historic gardens and parks. Bottmingham Castle is located in the town of the same name in the canton of Basel-Landschaft in northwest Switzerland. It is a moated castle sitting in a pond fed by the nearby Birsig River. The castle, which was constructed before 1400, was acquired by the city of Basel, which then sold it to private individuals, reserving the right of preemption. In the early 18th century, the castle was renovated and expanded in an early Baroque style by Johannes Deutscher. Since 1955, it has belonged to the canton of Basel-Stadt and now houses a restaurant. It may seem strange that one canton would own property in another canton, but when the canton of Basel was split into 2 half cantons, Basel-Landschaft and Basel-Stadt, Basel-Stadt must have maintained ownership of the castle. There are all sorts of isolated villages in Switzerland that don't belong to their surrounding canton. The castle is shown in a lovely night view on the 85 centimes stamp of the 2018 Christmas issue. Burgdorf Castle, located in the town of Burgdorf in the canton of Bern in central Switzerland, has retained its original construction, making it one of the few castles that weren't altered over the centuries. The castle was built on a crag in the 12th century by the Zeringens, whose line later died out. Burgdorf Castle then passed to the Kyburgs in 1218. In the 14th century, the Kyburgs became increasingly indebted. On 11 November 1382, Kyburg Count Rudolf launched a raid against the city of Solothurn to try to force the city to forgive his debts. For the city of Bern, this attack on an allied city represented an excellent opportunity for the city to break its ties with the Kyburgs. In March 1383, the Bernese Solothurn army marched into Burgdorf. The army besieged the city for 45 days, but was unsuccessful. However, on the 5th of April 1384, the Kyburg counts were forced to sell their towns and castles to Burgdorf and Thun to Bern for 37,800 guilders in exchange for peace. The city of Bern then used it as an administrative office. A museum was established in the castle in 1888. During the Napoleonic period, the castle was used as Johann Heinrich Pestalozzi's schoolhouse. Pestalozzi was a Swiss educational reformer. In 2012, Bern closed the administrative offices and the castle was converted entirely to public spaces, including the museums, restaurant, and a youth hostel. The castle is featured on the 1978 40 plus 20 centimes Pro Patria semi-postal stamp. The castle in Eschandens in the canton of Vaud was built on the site of a medieval fortress in 1554 by Ferdinand de Loys as a residence in the transitional style between Gothic and Renaissance. The castle passed through a series of owners until 1978, when it was purchased by the local government. The writer Georges Simenon lived in the castle between 1957 and 1963, which is the reason it appears on a stamp. Simenon, with the castle in the background, is shown on the 1 franc stamp from the 1994 joint issue with Belgium and France celebrating Simenon. Frauenfeld Castle is located in the canton of Thurgau in northeastern Switzerland. It was the property of the Counts of Kyburg. At the beginning of the 13th century, they constructed a series of defensive features to protect the town of Frauenfeld and the castle, its most important asset. The Kyburg line died out, and the property was transferred to the Habsburgs. The castle then changed hands again. In 1407, the castle was attacked by forces from Appenzell, but they were unsuccessful in breaking the walls. This prompted the improvement of the defenses and a deepening of the moat. Attacked again in 1460, the castle held, but the canton of Thurgau fell, leaving the castle isolated. Finally, in 1534, through a trade, the castle became part of the Swiss Confederation. It was then modified to make it a residence. After the Napoleonic period, Thurgau acquired the property and established the canton's offices of financial administration there. In 1839, road construction caused the destruction of the enclosure walls and the filling in of the moat. 1867, Thurgau completed a new government building and sold the castle to a private citizen who saved it from destruction. Frauenfeld Castle was later donated to the canton, and a cantonal history museum was established in it in 1960. It appears on the 1.7 franc value of the 1964-68 Architectural Monuments Definitive Set. The Freuler Palast, which is located in Naffels in Canton Glarus, is one of Switzerland's finest 17th century residential buildings. Canton Glarus is in the southeast part of Switzerland, as shown on the small map. Caspar Freuler, who lived in the first half of the 17th century, commissioned the construction of this opulent palace. He served the kings of France as a Swiss military contractor. Artistically minded, in 1642 to 1648, he invited artisans from all over Europe to Naples to create an elaborate architectural opus. The ornate stuccoed interior, richly ornamented paneling, and ceilings are an impressive testament to the artisan's skills and the patron's wealth. The Freuler Palast has served as the museum of the municipality of Glarus, as the canton's historical museum since 1946. Its main focal point is an exhibition on textile printing in Glarus. It is shown on the 10 centime value of the 1964-68 Architectural Monuments Definitive Set. Granson Castle is located in the canton of Vaud and is considered to be one of the most important of all Switzerland's monuments. There had been a Roman fort on the site prior to its destruction in the 13th century to build the castle in its present form. When the family line who owned the castle died out, the castle was confiscated by the House of Savoy in 1397, which gave it to the ally of the Duke of Burgundy, the Count of Chillon. The Count further fortified the castle prior to the Burgundian Wars, but it fell to the Confederates after the 1476 Battle of Granson. That battle saw the defeat of the greatest Duke of Europe, Charles the Bold. Today, the castle is a museum containing armor and weapons from the period of the battle. The castle is pictured on the 1976 40 plus 20 centime Pro Patria semi-postal stamp. In addition, two capitals from columns in the building are shown on the 1.1 franc and 1.7 franc values of the 1973 to 75 architectural details definitive set. Haeg and Ital, the only moated castle remaining in eastern Switzerland, is in Rapperswil in the canton of Thurgau, as shown on the little map. The oldest part of the castle is the central keep, a tower dating from about 1200. Various additions over the following centuries included the half-timbered residence prominent in views of the castle. The castle and its land were sold to the Abbey of St. Gall in 1684, which then sold it in 1806 to a farmer who farmed the land and ran a restaurant in the castle that is still in operation today. The castle has appeared on Swiss stamps twice, the 1978 20 plus 10 centimes Pro Patria semi-postal and the 2018 85 plus 40 centime Pro Patria semi-postal. Hallwyl Castle is located in the town of Siegen in the canton of Aargau in northwestern Switzerland. It's located on two islands in the Aabach River, as seen in the detailed map, the river flows into the Lake of Hallwyl. First mentioned in writing in 1167, the castle was the seat of the von Hallwyl family until 1994, when it was bequeathed to Aargau. During the conquest of Aargau by the Confederate troops in 1415, the castle was burned, but then immediately rebuilt and expanded. The two turrets were added in the 16th century. Major renovation of the castle took place from 1997 to 2005. The castle now houses a museum of medieval life and that of the von Hallwyl family. The 1977 80 plus 20 centime Pro Patria semi-postal shows the castle. Haeg Castle is located in the canton of Luzern in the little village of Gelfingen, as shown on the little map. The first written mention of Haeg dates from 1185. Haeg Castle was constructed around 1192 in the village. The 13th century was the golden age for the lords of Haeg during the era of the Kyburgs and the Habsburgs. In 1386, Haeg was the only castle in the region not destroyed by the Confederates. In 1482, the castle and its lands were purchased by a farmer from Lucerne. The castle remained in private hands until 1700, when the city of Lucerne acquired it and completed its construction. After the Napoleonic period, the castle became the property of the canton of Lucerne and was operated as an inn until 1849, when another farmer bought the castle. The farmer sold it in 1875 to Ludwig Pfeiffer von Haeg and his American wife, Carolyn Slidell, a wealthy South Carolinian. They modernized the castle tower in 1912 and donated the castle to Lucerne in 1950. Its famous rose gardens were started around the time of the donation. The castle was completely renovated during 1995 to 98. It now houses the Swiss Hunting Museum and is a venue for social and cultural events. The castle and its lovely rose gardens are shown in the 2006 85 plus 40 centimes pro patria semi-postal stamp. The stamp is from a set celebrating historic gardens and parks. The Ital-Reding farmstead is one of the most important building groups in Canton Schwyz in central Switzerland. Within the enclosing wall are the Manor House, the Bethlehem House, and the farm building, which today is the cantonal library. The Manor House was built in 1609 by Ital-Reding, a Landvogt and a descendant of a line of Swiss politicians dating back to the founding of the Confederation in 1291. The front of the building is a Baroque garden. The magnificence of the manor house can be fully appreciated once inside. On the first floor there is a large garden hall. Below it, the vaulted cellar. The actual staterooms with rich panels and ceilings in wood are located in traditional style on the second floor. The Bethlehem House, built in 1287, is a unique witness of the time when the Confederation was formed. In the brick base of Bethlehem House, there is a hall decorated with 16th century wall paintings. The house appears on the 1.5 franc value of the 1960 to 68 Architectural Monuments Definitive Set. Jörgenberg Castle is located in the canton of Graubünden in southeastern Switzerland. Graubünden is the home of the Romansh language, which is a version of Latin. Towns and places in Graubünden are named in both German and in Romansh. The castle is located in the German town of Waltensburg, which is known as Voraz. The castle began as a fortified church in the 8th century. Over the centuries, it became a feudal castle, the main tower of which was completed in 1265. In a dispute over the title to Jörgenberg in 1333, the main tower was burned. In 1351, the tower was rebuilt and the castle enlarged. Jörgenberg passed through various lay and secular hands until it was abandoned in the 17th century and fell into ruins. In 1931-32, the ruins were excavated, cleaned, and reinforced. Further repairs were made during 1998 to 2001. The castle appears on the 1.40 franc stamp from the souvenir sheet of 4 issued in 1987 to celebrate 200 years of tourism in Switzerland. The canton of Zurich is the home to Kyburg Castle in a town of the same name. Perched on a hill above the Taas River, Kyburg was first mentioned in 1027. At that time, Hartmann von Dillingen came into possession of the grounds and the castle through marriage. He added to both and called himself Count of Kyburg. The von Dillingen family became the most important noble family next to the Habsburgs and the House of Savoy in the area of today's Swiss Mittelland. The Kyburg line died out in 1264, and Rudolf von Habsburg inherited the property. After his election as the King of Germany, the imperial regalia were said to have been kept in this castle. In the 15th century, the city of Zurich purchased Kyburg, which it then administered as a Landvogtei, a German governorship. Until 1798, noble citizens of Zurich served as bailiffs of the Kyburg Castle. Each noble held that position for 6 years. Bailiffs held court and collected the taxes. Following a reorganization in 1831, Kyburg Castle lost its administrative function and was auctioned off. In 1865, the owner opened the castle to public as an art museum. In 1917, the canton of Zurich bought the castle back. In 1999, the Museum Schloss Kyburg Association took over the running of the museum. Kyburg Castle appears on the 1976 20 plus 10 centimes pro patria semi-postal stamp. La Sarraz Castle is located in the canton of Vaud in a town of the same name. The castle dates to the 11th century. It remained in the same family until 1948, when it was bequeathed to an organization charged with its preservation and development. The original defensive structure gradually became a residence, which by the 16th century was a powerful baronial estate. The castle burned down twice, first in 1477 during the Burgundian Wars, and again in 1556, defending Geneva from the Vaudois lords. In 1802, in a popular uprising against the restoration of feudal rights and taxes, the castle was attacked with the aim of destroying the archives upon which the feudal rights were based. The revolt partially succeeded, with some of the archives lost to fire and water damage. The castle's furnishings are of national importance, and its library is one of the finest in Vaud. It is shown on the 1999 70 plus 35 centimes pro patria semi-postal stamp. Laupen Castle is located in the canton of Bern, as shown on the small map. Its history goes back to the 10th to 13th centuries as a part of the Second Kingdom of Burgundy. Laupen was one of a string of imperial castles built along the Sance and Saône rivers. Laupen was the residence of the king. It then passed to the Dukes of Zeringen, the Kyburgs, and finally to the Habsburgs. In 1310, the Habsburg king pledged the castle and its land to Bern as collateral for a loan. In 1324, the king defaulted on the loan, and Laupen became the first bailiwick of Bern. The Battle of Laupen in 1339 pitted Bern and its Swiss confederates against the town of Freiburg. It was one of the first in a series of battles that marked the decline of armored knights against an army of infantry soldiers. The victory against Freiburg led Bern to joining the Confederation in 1354. After Bern took over the castle, it became an administrative center for the region and was expanded. Laupen Castle, shown on the 1939 10 plus 10 centime pro patria semi-postal stamp, was the residence of the bailiff until 1798. It later served as the district court until 2007. In 2012, it was purchased by a foundation, which operates it now as a museum. Lenzburg Castle is located in the canton of Aargau. It is one of the oldest and most historic hilltop castles in Switzerland. The castle is perched on a hill 325 feet high, with a diameter of only 820 feet. The castle was first mentioned in writing in 1077. The castle passed from the Lenzburg line to Frederick I Barbarossa, Emperor of the Germanic Holy Roman Empire, who then gave it to the Kyburg family. When the Kyburg line died out, Lenzburg passed to the Habsburgs, who enlarged the castle in 1340. In 1415, the Bernese invaded the Habsburg land, and the castle became the residence of the Bernese bailiff in 1444. The castle was further fortified in the 17th century, but the Napoleonic occupation ended the castle's feudal rights. In 1803, the newly formed canton of Aargau took possession of the castle, but had no use for it, so the canton sold it in 1853 to the Pestalozzi Scotchburn family. The castle was sold several times, and in 1893, the American paper manufacturer Augustus Jessup turned the castle into an elegant residence for his wife, Lady Bowles-Lyon, a relative of the English royal family. He then sold it to another American industrialist, James Ellsworth, who had made his fortune in coal, who then bequeathed it to his son, Lincoln Ellsworth, the polar explorer, in 1925. The city of Lenzburg and the canton of Aargau finally bought the castle in 1956 and made it a cantonal museum. Lenzburg Castle is shown in the 1968 5-centime stamp in the 1964-68 Architectural Monuments Definitive Series. Misocco Castle is located in the town of the same name in the canton of Graubünden. In the 7th century, Misocco Castle began as a fortified church on a hilltop that served as a refuge castle for the surrounding villages. Around 1000, a bell tower was added to the church and its fortifications were enhanced. In the latter half of the 12th century, a Burgfried was added. A Burgfried is a freestanding defensive tower similar to a keep. With these improvements, the castle became the residence of the noblemen who ruled over the valley. In 1219, Misocco was first mentioned as a castle. In the 13th century, the castle was expanded again, and the ring wall was built around the structures, and a residential wing was added. At that time, it became the seat of the local baron, who controlled the Val Messolcina, an alpine valley, whose power extended over the San Bernardino Pass. The Baron was the founding member of the Grey League, one of the competing powers in Graubünden. In 1406, the Baron was murdered, leading to the decline of the family's power. In 1480, the castle was sold to a general from Milan to strengthen Milan's claim on the strategic Val Messolina. However, the general reneged on his payment for the castle, even though he occupied it. The baron's family besieged the castle to force payment, but were unsuccessful. The general eventually broke with Milan and paid what he owed. He then further expanded the castle and installed cannons to add to the defenses. He pledged support to the Grey League, which involved him and his forces in the Swabian War of 1499 and the 1524 Musso War. In 1526, the newly formed three leagues, the League of God's House, the League of 10 Jurisdictions, and the Grey League, which eventually formed the canton of Graubünden, were ordered the castle abandoned. The castle fell into ruins until 1925, when it was excavated and reinforced. Further projects during 1986 to 90 restored the tower and some of its walls. Misocco Castle is illustrated on the 1944 20 plus 10 centimes pro patria semi-postal stamp. The Munot Castle towers over the city of Schaffhausen in the canton of the same name. Schaffhausen is the only canton which lies north of the Rhine. In 1501, the town wanted the protection of a castle. After years of argument and plans, it was finally decided in 1563 to build a circular artillery castle. The Munot was constructed between 1564 and 1589. Unfortunately, in the almost century during which the castle was built and argued over, developments in artillery made the castle obsolete. In the early 19th century, it was used as a stone quarry until an association was founded in 1839 to protect the structure. The Munot Castle is pictured on the 1960 90 centimes Architectural Monuments Definitive. The Murten Castle is located in the canton of Freiburg. The original castle was commissioned by Count Peter II of Savoy in 1255. A fire in 1416 destroyed the original castle, and it was rebuilt in stone. In 1476, Charles the Bold laid siege to Murten. The occupants of the castle resisted for 12 days and were relieved by the Bernese army after it routed the Burgundian forces in the Battle of Morat. After the battle, the castle became the joint residence of the bailiffs of both Bern and Freiburg, because Murten was controlled by both towns. After the Napoleonic era, the Act of Mediation awarded the town to Freiburg. The castle was rebuilt in 1755. The castle is depicted on the 1976 40 plus 20 centimes Pro Patria semi-postal stamp. The Neu-Bechburg Castle is located in Unsingen in the canton of Solothurn in northwestern Switzerland. It was built around 1250 by the barons of Bechburg. During the next 160 years, the castle changed owners several times. In 1415, the castle and dominion were sold to Bern and Solothurn. In 1463, the castle passed into the full possession of Solothurn, and a bailiwick was established. In 1635, the castle temporarily became the seat of the Bishop of Basel. The castle went into decline during the Napoleonic occupation. After the occupation, it served as a poorhouse, a private dwelling, an inn, and a quarry. In 1835, it was acquired by the Riggenbach family, who restored it in 1880. In 1975, the castle was sold and then donated to a foundation. The 2016 1 franc plus 50 centimes Pro Patria semi-postal stamp pictures the Neu-Bechburg Castle. Neuchâtel is located in the canton of the same name in western Switzerland. In 1100, the Counts of Fennes seized the town of Neuchâtel and took the title of Counts of Neuchâtel. The son of the first count built a luxurious residence on a hill above the town. The town prospered and officially became a city in 1214 and a principality beginning in the 17th century. The Princess of Neuchâtel died in 1707, and the people of Neuchâtel had to choose who would be strong enough to protect them, yet reside far enough away so as not to interfere with the affairs of the Neuchâtelois. They chose Frederick I of Prussia, who, through a complex genealogical chain through the houses of Orange and Nassau, asserted his claim to the title of Prince of Neuchâtel. Frederick was defeated by Napoleon and had to give up Neuchâtel in order to retain the town of Hanover in Germany. Napoleon appointed his field marshal Berthier as Prince of Neuchâtel in 1806. His reign lasted until 1814. Neuchâtel became the 21st canton in 1815, but remained a Prussian principality until a popular uprising in 1848 declared Neuchâtel a republic. In 1856-57, Prussia formally renounced its claim on the canton. The 12th century residence is now the seat of the Neuchâtel government. The castle has appeared on 2 issues, a 1948 10-centime stamp recognizing the 100th anniversary of the Swiss federal state, and the 50-cent stamp of the 1964-68 Architectural Monuments Definitive Series. Nyon Castle is located in the town of Nyon in Canton Vaud. The castle was originally a fortified house built in the middle of the 12th century by the Cossonay Prangins family. In 1293, the Counts of Savoy took it over and from 1360 on transformed it considerably by adding 2 towers on the lakeside in 1388. Nyon Castle was rebuilt in 1463 by Louis I of Savoy. In 1530, the forces of the Confederation took Nyon. In 1536, Nyon became the Bernese administrative center of the area. Between 1574 and 1583, the chief magistrates of Bern undertook major construction work, giving the castle the appearance it has today. Following the Vaud Revolution in 1798, the town of Nyon purchased the castle from the newly created canton of Vaud in 1804. It subsequently housed the courts, the meetings of the town council, the prison, and after 1888, the town museum. With the gradual loss of its defensive features, the castle essentially became an administrative building. In 1947, the houses standing in front of the castle were pulled down and a huge square created, thus completely changing the view of the fortification. The castle was entirely renovated between 1999 and 2006 and is now a museum. The castle is shown on the 1958 5-cent stamp honoring the 2000th anniversary of the city of Nyon. Oberhofen is a moated castle on the shore of Lake Thun in the canton of Bern. Constructed in the 13th century by the von Eschenbach family, the castle was purchased by the Habsburgs in 1306. After the defeat of the Habsburgs in the Battle of Sempach in 1386, the Bernese occupied the castle and all of the previously Habsburg-controlled land in the Swiss Oberland. The Bernese sold the castle and the town to a citizen in Bern in 1398. After passing through various Bernese patricians, Bern acquired the castle and land in 1652 and made the castle into an administrative center for the bailiwick. After the Napoleonic occupation, the castle once again passed into private hands. In 1884, the Neuchâtel Prussian Count Albert von Portales acquired the estate on Lake Thun and converted the manor into a romantic historic castle. It remained the summer residence of the Count's family until 1925. In that year, the American lawyer William Mowell Measy bought the castle, and in 1940 he established as a foundation. A branch of the Bern Museum of History was established in the castle in 1954. A waterside restaurant was added to the castle grounds in 2013. The 2017 1 franc plus 50 centimes pro patria stamp pictures the Oberhofen Castle. Oron Castle is located in Oron-le-Châtel in the canton of Vaud. It was built at the end of the 12th century by the Doron family. When the Doron line died out in 1388, the castle passed to the Counts of Gruyères. The Counts yielded the castle and land to Freiburg and Bern in 1555, when it became a Bernese bailiwick. After the Napoleonic occupation, it was acquired in 1801 by the Roberti family of Moudon, and in 1870 it was bought by Adolphe Geif. Beginning in 1880, a library was built in the castle. Today it houses 17,000 volumes and is one of the largest private collections of French novelists of the 18th century in Europe. A foundation bought Oron Castle in 1936 to preserve it. The castle is open to the public, and because it has been inhabited continuously since it was constructed, it has a lived-in feel with all of the original furnishings that are lacking in some castles. The 1979 20 plus 10 centimes pro patria semi-postal stamp illustrates the castle. Porrentruy Castle is located in the canton of Jura in northwestern Switzerland. It was built between the mid-13th century and the beginning of the 18th century. The oldest part is the 13th century Rehfuss Tower. 14th century ramparts survive on the western and northern sides. The castle burned in 1558. Since 1271, it belonged to the bishopric of Basel, and the castle served as the exile residence of the prince bishops of Basel from 1527 until 1792. The bishops had been exiled from Basel during the Swiss Reformation in 1529, whereas they were able to keep most of their territories outside the city. They rebuilt it to serve as their exile residence. The castle served as a religious retreat from 1837 to 1896, as an orphanage until 1930, and as a barracks beginning in 1937. It currently houses the cantonal administration. It is featured on the 1979 70 plus 30 centime pro patria semi-postal stamp. The castle in Prangins in the canton of Vaud was originally a defensive structure, but that castle was burned by the Bernese in 1536. It was rebuilt and changed hands repeatedly over the coming centuries. Nicholas de Diesbach enlarged the property in 1613. His family ceded the property to Emily de Nassau in 1627. The Demesne was sold in 1656. It was sold again in 1719, this time to Jean Rieux, a Genevan citizen and a Paris banker. 4 years later, in 1723, he passed it on to another Paris banker, Louis Gouiger. Gouiger, who was originally from the cantons of St. Gallen, built the palace in 2 phases. During 1727 to 32, he added outbuildings and a service wing, and from 1737 to 1739, he renovated the entire building to make it more symmetrical and attractive. The castle was inherited by successive generations of the Gouiger family, and in 1814, Charles Jules Gouiger sold the castle to Joseph Bonaparte, the elder brother of Napoleon Bonaparte. In 1929, Josephine Dexter bought Prangins for her daughter, Catherine McCormick. In 1962, the castle was passed to the government of the United States. It was intended to be the residence of the ambassador to the United Nations from the United States. Instead, in 1970, it was sold to Bernard Cornfield, administrator of the Investment Overseas Services. Around this time, the Swiss National Museum wanted to transfer part of its collection to a suitable location in the French-speaking region of Switzerland. Prangins Castle seemed ideal. The Swiss federal government balked at the sale price, then 2.5 million francs. Instead, the property was purchased by the cantonal governments of Vaud and Geneva in 1974. A year later, it was given to the federal government to become a Swiss National Museum. A great deal of renovation work was required, and the museum opened in 1998. The Swiss Post Office issued a stamp in 1998 to honor the opening of the museum. Pratteln Castle is located in the town of the same name in the canton of Basel-Landschaft. In the early Middle Ages, the monastery Murbach owned the town, and the village was later belonged to the Habsburgs, who gave it as a fief to the lords of von Eptingen. The moated castle of Pratteln was built by the family von Eptingen in around 1275. On 18 October 1356, the Basel earthquake destroyed the castle and was then rebuilt. After restoring the castle, von Eptingen tried to become independent from the county rule. The acquisition of this right gave rise to decades-long litigation fought mainly by the leading member of the family, Hans Bernhard. In 1464, he succeeded in becoming the sole master of Pratteln and its dominion by buying the possessions of his cousins. The castle and village were sacked twice, in 1384 by Basel and in 1468 by Solothurn in the Sundgau War. In 1484, Bernhard died shortly after he had donated the great bell to the village church. Financial difficulties and disputes within the family led to the downfall of the dynasty. In 1521, Hans Friedrich sold the castle and the village for 5,000 guilders to the city of Basel. It was not until 1549 that Austria finally waived the right to rule Pratteln. The castle became a manor under the bailiwick Munchenstein, the owners of the castle, who had to be citizens of Basel, but were country gentlemen without sovereign powers. They changed frequently. In 1773, the castle and its large estate became into public hands. The community sold most of the properties in parcels to local residents in the following years, keeping only the castle and some meadowland. The castle became the workhouse and in 1910 was donated to the municipality. In 1963, a total renovation was approved for 1.1 million Swiss francs. In 1968, the castle was opened to the public. Since 1966, the castle has been used for communal administration. The castle is pictured on the 1977 40 plus 20 centime Pro Patria semi-postal stamp. The castle in Rapperswil has a very interesting history. It's in the canton of St. Gallen, in a town of the same name. The castle is almost in the form of an equilateral triangle with the tower on each of 3 points. The castle, which dates from 1200 to 1220, was built by the Counts of Rapperswil. When that line died out in 1283, it passed to Rudolf I, the Habsburg King of Germany. The Herrschaft Rapperswil proper passed to the House of Hamburg. In 1350, an attempted coup by the aristocratic opposition in the city of Zurich was forcefully put down, and the town walls of Rapperswil and the castle were destroyed. The battlements and the castle were rebuilt by Albrecht II, Duke of Austria, in 1352 to 54. After the extinction of the line of Hamburg in 1442, the castle was given to the citizens of Rapperswil. Rapperswil was controlled by the Swiss Confederation from 1458 to 1798 as the so-called Gemeindeherrschaft, that is, under control of 2 cantons of the old Swiss Confederation and their representative, a Vogt, and Rapperswil Castle became, in turn, an administration site, a military base, and a prison. Over the course of time, the castle fell into disrepair. In 1870, the castle was leased for 99 years from the local authorities by a Polish emigre, Count Władysław Borel-Plater, who had been in Switzerland since 1844. At his own expense, he restored the castle, and in 1870 the Polish National Museum was established. Except for two hiatuses, 1927 to 1936 and 1952 to 1975, the museum has existed to the present day, an outpost of Polish culture in Switzerland. In 2008, some Rapperswil residents petitioned local authorities to evict the Polish Museum from its home in the castle, as they thought two historical museums were too expensive. Their efforts were in vain, however. The municipal authorities denied the petition. The castle is shown on the 80 plus 40 centime pro patria semi-postal stamp. Romont Castle, in town of the same name in Canton Fribourg, was built by Peter II of Savoy around 1220, and not surprisingly is a typical moated Savoyard castle featuring a round keep at the corner of a square castle. In 1536, after the conquest of Vaud by the Bernese, the castle became the administrative headquarters of Freiburg, with the bailiff residing there. The castle had fallen into disrepair during the period of Savoyard control and was rebuilt in 1588. The offices in the castle were rebuilt in the 20th century and now house a museum of stained glass. Romont Castle appears on the 2018 1 franc plus 50 centimes pro patria semi-postal stamp. The town of Sargans lies on the border of Liechtenstein and Switzerland in the canton of St. Gallen. The tower of Sargans Castle and its enclosure date from 1200. The town grew up around the castle. In 1342, Rudolf IV acquired the castle, but his son Jean I had to mortgage it to Duke Leopold of Austria in 1396. The castle and town were attacked by forces from Appenzell in 1405. The Confederates attacked in 1445, and the town was burned to the ground. The castle survived. The castle partially collapsed shortly thereafter from lack of maintenance. In 1446, a new building was added, and it was destroyed 300 years later, with only the foundation remaining. Sargans became part of the Confederation in 1483, and the castle became the seat of a bailiff. The castle was expanded to include a courtroom with murals that date from 1580. In 1798, the castle became the property of the state and was attached to the new canton of St. Gallen in 1803. A fire again devastated the town in 1811, and the castle served as a school thereafter. Sargans Castle was sold to a private individual in 1834, and the town bought it back in 1899. It now houses a restaurant and a museum. The castle is depicted on the 1977 70 plus 30 centimes pro patria semi-postal. Spiez Castle lies on the banks of Lake Thun in Canton Bern, and was built by the King of Burgundy, Rudolf II, in 933. Freiherr von Streitingling settled in the castle. By 1280, the castle was listed as an imperial fief under Vogt Richard de Corbières. In 1289, the Freiherr von Streitingling was the co-owner of the castle, along with a succession of other noble families. In 1308, the Habsburgs granted the fief to Johannes von Strattingen. In 1338, Johannes sold the castle, town, church, and surrounding villages to Johann II von Bubenberg, who was the Schultheiss of Bern. By 1340, the Bubenberg-appointed Vogt took orders from Bern, but was obligated to raise troops for the Habsburgs. As Bern was a de facto independent from their former overlords, the Habsburgs, this created an unstable situation that remained for over 40 years. After the Bernese and Swiss Confederation victory over the Habsburgs in the Battle of Sempach in 1386, the Habsburgs gave up their land claims west of the Aar, which included Spiez. The castle and surrounding land remained with the Bubenberg family until their extinction in 1506, when it was acquired by Ludwig von Diesbach. Von Diesbach held it for 10 years before Ludwig von Erlach acquired the castle and lands. The von Erlach family ruled the town and villages until the 1798 French invasion. After the invasion, the von Erlach family lost their land rights and jurisdiction over the village, but retained ownership of the castle until 1875. The massive square keep was built around 1200. The tower increased in height several times over the following centuries before the final construction phase in 1600. In this final phase, the tower was raised and crowned with a hipped roof that brought its total height to 128 feet. The old castle was expanded in several stages during the late Middle Ages, but little is known about the specific dates or what was changed. In 1600, the Great Hall and northern buildings were expanded and renovated. During the 17th and 18th centuries, the South New Castle was built and expanded and redecorated in the late Baroque style. After 1875, the castle passed through several owners until a foundation bought the castle and associated church. The gardens are now open to the public, and the castle rooms are used for conferences, concerts, exhibitions, and other events. It is pictured on the 1979 40 plus 20 centimes pro patria semi-postal stamp. The Stockalper Palace is in Brigg-Bliss in the canton of Valais in southern Switzerland. It was built between 1658 and 1678 by Caspar Stockalper, a silk merchant from Brigg. The Stockalper Palace was the largest private construction in Switzerland at that time. The first building on the site is known as the Stockalper House, which was built in 1532 by Peter Stockalper. Over the following century, it was expanded toward the north, but remained generally unchanged until the rise of Caspar Stockalper, born in 1609, who built an extensive trading empire. By 1647, he had the local salt monopoly and built a road over the Simplon Pass, which gave him a monopoly over this pass. Between 1630 and 1640, Caspar extended the Stockalper House toward the south with a great hall, chapel, and other construction. A two-story covered arcade leads from the Stockalper House to the much larger palace. Caspar's extensive trade empire required an extensive warehouse, and in 1658 he began construction on the palace to provide that space. Construction lasted 20 years. The palace was built next to the smaller 16th century Gothic Stockalper House. It is a rectangular building with 3 towers on the northwest, southwest, and southeast corners. The interior features a large rectangular courtyard with arcades in the style of the Italian Renaissance. The balusters that line the second story are not original but were added later. The 3 towers were named for the 3 kings or the wise men of the Bible. The tallest is named after Saint Caspar, as well as Caspar Stockalper. The other 2 were then named Melchior and Balthazar, the traditional names of the wise men. Once it was completed, Caspar did not get many opportunities to enjoy his monumental building. In 1679, the communities of Visp, Leuk, Sierre, and Sion rose up against him and drove him into exile in Domosdossela. 6 years later, in 1685, the Diet of Valais negotiated an agreement that allowed Caspar to return and live out his last years in his palace. In 1948, the city took over the palace, and in 1960, the city council moved in. A museum was established in the palace, and some of the rooms were renovated and used for concerts and exhibitions. The three towers can be seen on the 10-cent stamp issued in 1956 for the 50th anniversary of the Simplon Tunnel. Sarraz Castle is in the town of Tarasp in the canton of Graubünden. It was built in the 10th or 11th century and was first mentioned in writing in 1089. In the 12th century, the castle was held by the von Tarasp family, or the Bishop of Chur. In 1273, it was sold to Albrecht of Tyrol, who installed the Mach family as vassals of Tyrol. The lands of the Count of Tyrol were inherited by the Dukes of Austria, and the castle became Habsburg property. During the Reformation, the people of the Engadine attacked the Catholic-held castle 3 times, in 1548, 1578, and in 1612. During the third attack, the castle was burned. The castle remained under Austrian control until the Napoleonic occupation. In 1803, the castle was taken from the Austrians and awarded to the newly created canton of Graubünden. The castle was abandoned in 1815 and fell into ruin. In 1856, the canton sold it to the von Planta family, who repaired it and gave it a new roof. It was purchased by a German doctor named Lingner, who restored the castle from 1906 to 1916. Upon his death, the castle was inherited by Grand Duke Ernest Louis of Hesse, who turned the castle into a museum. In 2004, the von Hessen family announced their intention to sell the castle to Tarasp. The foundation could not raise the funds to purchase the castle. In 2010, a foundation was established to raise funds to take care of the castle once it was sold. In 2016, the Swiss artist Not Vital bought the castle. Guided tours are now available. Castle Tarasp appears on the 1978 70 plus 30 centimes pro patria semi-postal stamp. The castle of Tourbillon and the Basilica of Valère are built on an interesting geological formation of twin rocky hills that rise above the city of Sion in the canton of Valais. The castle and basilica date from the 12th and 13th centuries. The name Valère is first mentioned in 1049 as the site of a cathedral chapter in Sion. The first parts of the church were built between 1100 and 1130 in the Romanesque style. The church served as a refuge during conflicts. The next construction phase began after 1130 and included the semicircular apse, the walls and windows, and a roof. The third phase saw the church expand and the style changed to the new Gothic style. Between 1235 and 1267, the nave expanded and was flanked with 2 aisles. During the 13th century, the choir was covered with a Gothic ribbed vault, and rood screen was installed to separate the chancel from the nave. The famous organ was installed around 1430 to 1435, and other than a modification in the 1700s, is essentially unchanged. Tourbillon was built at the end of the 13th century at the direction of Bishop Boniface de Chalant of the Diocese of Sion. Of a defensive nature and perched on the top of a steep rocky hill, it served as the residence of the bishops of Sion. The Tourbillon Castle was badly damaged by the conflicts between the bishops and the people of Valais. It was burned down in 1417 during the Rouron affair, a war between the people of Sion and the Rouron family. It was rebuilt by Bishop William III of Rouron some 30 years later. In 1788, it was completely destroyed by another fire. The stones of the castle were used for some time for construction in the region before the ruins were reinforced in the 19th century to make it a historical monument. Valais is paired with Tourbillon Castle physically, historically, and philately. The pair are visible in the background of the 1953 20 centimes Alpine post bus stamp. Tourbillon is on the left and Valais is on the right. Castello Visconteo is in the heart of downtown Locarno in Canton Ticino in the south of Switzerland. It was first constructed in the late 12th century or the 13th century, but was expanded and rebuilt continually until 1507. During the 14th century, Milan, under the Visconti, aggressively expanded into the valleys at the foot of the Alps. In 1342, the Visconti besieged and captured the castle. The town was administered by a podesta appointed by Milan. The podesta became the only resident of the castle. The fortifications were strengthened and new defensive walls were built. In 1439, the Visconti appointed Francino Rusca as podesta of Locarno. Under the Rusca family, the castle was renovated, repaired, and expanded. It was transformed into an ornate, late medieval administrative castle. A little south of the old main tower, a palazzo was built with ornate halls, large chimneys, and an arcade leading to a courtyard. It was surrounded by a ring wall with machinations and half-round towers, which were topped with swallowtail merlons. In the mid to late 15th century, the Duke of Milan became concerned that the Rusca family might support the old Swiss Confederacy against Milan. He appointed a castellan to manage the castle for him. The Rusca family remained at the castle in the palazzo, while the castellan lived in the old main tower known as the Rocca. In 1495, Louis XII of France offered Locarno to the Swiss Confederacy in exchange for military help against Milan. 4 years later, he invaded Lombardy and quickly captured the castle and the town of Locarno. However, he continually delayed and avoided handing the town over to the Swiss. In 1503, the Confederation invaded and conquered the Levantine Valley and captured Locarno. However, the Treaty of Arona gave the fortifications at Bellinzona to the Confederation, but returned the town to France. In 1507, the castle complex was expanded for the last time when the Rivellino, a triangular bastion, was added to the north side of the complex. In 1512, during the War of the League of the Cambrai, the Confederation again invaded the Alpine foothills, including Locarno. They besieged the castle but did not have the artillery needed to capture it. In 1513, negotiations after the decisive Swiss victory at the Battle of Novardor gave temporary control over the castle to the Swiss. In 1516, the peace treaty, which ended the War of the League of Cambrai, gave them permanent control over much of Ticino, including Locarno. The Swiss appointed a Landvogt to administer Locarno for the Confederation from the castle. The expense of maintaining a large complex soon proved too much, and in 1531 they decided to demolish much of the complex, leaving only the palazzo. The castle remained the seat of the Swiss Vogt until 1798's French invasion of Switzerland and the creation of the Helvetic Republic. After the collapse of the Republic, the 1803 Act of Mediation created the new canton of Ticino and transferred the castle to the new canton. It was used as a cantonal administration building until 1921, when it was transferred to the town of Locarno. Locarno repaired the castle and transformed it into a museum. The 2017 85 plus 40 centime pro patria semi-postal stamp pictures Castello Visconteo. The final castle on our tour is Zug Castle, which is in the town and canton of the same name. The castle was originally a wooden structure built around 1000. Later in the 11th century, a stone wall was constructed around a wooden house. The house was attacked and damaged during the 12th century. After the defeat of the Habsburgs at the Battle of Morgarten in 1315, Zug became a Habsburg stronghold surrounded by an increasingly hostile confederation. The confederation finally attacked Zug, and after a 2-week siege, the castle and town surrendered. The castle was unharmed during the siege. In 1555, a half-timbered structure was added to the castle. The castle was purchased from a private family by the town of Zug and renovated in 1982. It is now the Cantonal Museum. Zug Castle appears on the 2016 85 plus 40 centimes Pro Patria semi-postal stamp. I hope you have enjoyed this presentation, and maybe this tour has whetted your appetite to go visit some of the castles. I'm sure the tourist authorities in each of those little towns would appreciate that. Thank you for watching.